in a business like Soothe, which was primarily targeted at that demographic. And we didn't do that. We went by sort of like sex appeal, and that candidly like just didn't work. In other markets,
Don't pick markets by sex appeal. Is that a lesson?
that is, you heard it from me. Yeah, don't go to markets based on their sex appeal. Do the research.
Welcome to Frank Growth. I'm Jason Shafton. I run the growth consulting firm Winston Francois. Around here, we tell the truth about growing, the good, the bad, and the can't say it out loud ugly. Every episode, we get tactical with operators, investors, and builders about what works, what breaks, and what to do next. No fluff, no vanity metrics, no hustle theater, just signal. This is Frank Growth. Let's get into it. Today's topic, we've got Jeff Bishop Hill, the Swiss Army knife operator. Before we bring Jeff in, a quick riff on today's topic. Every scaling marketplace has this problem. You need someone who can run ops, close enterprise deals, manage compliance, build process, lead teams, and do all of it at the same time. Most companies try to hire 5 specialists. The best companies find the Swiss Army knife. 3 things that break when you scale a marketplace without one. First, process debt kills you quietly. New markets open, but unit economics never standardize. Every city runs differently, margins erode. 2, enterprise readiness is a myth. You think you're ready for big logos, but your compliance, pricing, and service quality aren't buttoned up, and the deal dies in procurement. And 3, generalists get undervalued. Teams over-index on specialists and miss the operator who can connect the dots across functions and actually ship. Jeff has done this 3 times at Soothe, Mercato, and now Rue, and he's here to break down exactly how. Let's get tactical. Jeff, welcome to Frank Growth.
Hey, Jason, how's it going?
It's great, man. It's good to see you, and really happy to have you here. You and I go back to Soothe. I was CMO. You were running marketplace ops, and you watched that business scale. I mean, you helped that business scale from a handful of cities to 70 plus markets in 6 countries. I saw firsthand how you operated across every function in that building: ops, compliance, account management, business development, often in the same week. You're the
Yeah,
definition of what I would call a Swiss Army knife operator. And I've been wanting to have this conversation for a while. So, just grateful for you to be here and excited to dive into it.
very excited to be here. Thanks for having me. And yeah, excited to talk about all things.
Yeah. So let's warm it up. In one sentence, from your perspective, what is a Swiss Army knife operator, and why do marketplaces need one?
It's someone who does everything that nobody else wants to do. That is how I would describe it. And that's okay. The things are fun. But example like legal, usually kind of a can of worms at an early stage startup. Like, what do we do here? HR, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, just a little bit of everything, honestly. You also get to experience new things all the time. And that's
True.
what makes that Swiss Army knife so fun.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it. At Soothe, you went from 12 cities to 70 in 6 countries. What were like some of the first things that broke when you were scaling that fast? And what did you kind of have to fix before anything else?
Yeah. So really what broke first was supply. There just was not enough supply. That's usually the case in most of the labor marketplaces that I've sort of focused in. You never have enough supply. There's always, I think it's easier to get demand, right? So you can always do digital advertising. You can pay to play, right? You can spend to get customers. Not always the same in terms of obtaining providers for your platform. So that broke frequently in many cities. You needed at least 10 to 15 providers in the market to launch. So the volume at launch would sort of match that, and then you could scale from there. But that was always what broke first.
What do you actually track week over week when you're scaling a marketplace into all these new markets? And what do most teams track that probably doesn't matter?
Yeah. So, uh, okay. So we'll start with what matters. That is the supply versus demand metrics for sure. Getting as close to your equilibrium as you possibly can. So in our case, that was number of appointments being requested versus the number of providers that would actually take the appointments, and scaling that as you kind of grow a market is very, very challenging. And that actually comes down to logistics. So like getting a person from point A to point B was super, super hard. Getting somebody from Beverly Hills to downtown is like next to impossible if it's 4 p.m. So thinking about those types of nuances. One other thing that really matters is customer feedback, and like monitoring CS situations. Yeah, making sure that they're feeling heard, and that if a problem occurs, that it is fixed to the best of our abilities. That like feeling heard piece is critical. You have to have an empathetic person, or in today's day and age, bot on the other end of that line to make sure that we can solve that solution so that we don't lose that customer. All the other metrics that I remember we had a million dashboards tracking all kinds of like nuances, but really what it boiled down to was supply and demand and then like customer satisfaction. So CSAT.
Those are important. When you landed at Rue, you expanded from, I think, 4 to 50 markets. How did you sequence that? And maybe what did you learn from Soothe that taught you about what not to repeat next time?
We were kind of going by the glamorized aspect of like what market looks good, maybe to investors or whatever the case may be. So, like, for example, we were focused on Miami and expanding to London and things like that when we really should have been focused on saturating the entire US because at that point in time, it was a race. We had a major competitor and it was literally like first to market would win that race. So, learnings there were sexiness is sure, you need to have some masthead cities that you're working on, but you really should be doing the work in terms of understanding your population dynamics, your high household, household income earners, and servicing those in a business like Soothe, which was primarily targeted at that demographic. And we didn't do that. We went by sort of like sex appeal, and that candidly like just didn't work. In other
Don't pick markets by sex appeal. Is that the lesson?
that is, you heard it from me. Yeah, don't go to markets based on their sex appeal. Do the research. And what that came down to was definitely like GI heat maps and understanding the logistics. In mass, probably cities like Houston, LA, Miami, it's very tough to move providers around. And so you've got to have providers that sort of sit over that HHI heat map and can fulfill those requested appointments. So as we got more sophisticated, we started to do that.
You've called yourself a generalist. What's the
Yes.
case for being the best generalist possible versus hiring lots of deep specialists early on?
So it's kind of that learned line of, sure, I'll tackle this project and see how deep I can get into it. Typically, what I have found is successful is you can start projects as a generalist, but you're not necessarily a finisher. And that's when you hire in the right person to do it. And actually, that gets called out on me in my reviews to this day, is I am great at starting things, but not necessarily great at finishing them. But it's just recognizing, okay, like this is the time to hire. How does that fit into your P&L? Do you need to create a capacity plan for like a sales model, et cetera, in order to make sure that you don't end up not finishing the project?
Close those open loops.
You close the loop. You close the loop.
I'm a loop closer. That's my superpower. All right, you've run business development, account management, client services, operations, compliance, sometimes all at the same time. How do you context switch across that many functions without having it affect the quality of your work?
Now I use AI to help with that. So I typically am recording super important conversations so that I have follow-up notes and whatnot. So it's a blend of analog and digital. The digital synthesizes like what's important. And then I kind of I'll humanize that and put what I know is really, really critical on my analog list and then chip away at it. So a blend of old and new, I guess is how I would describe that.
You lead roughly 60% of Rue's headcount. How do you build operating cadence and accountability across that many teams?
In my case, I was having sometimes up to like 13, 14, 15 direct reports across different scopes of the business. They have to be coming to you with the agenda. I find that's what works best, so that you can hold them accountable. And then, of course, like you'll have your own items that you want to go over, but making sure that they know that that meeting that you have with them or whatever is for them, that helps ruthlessly prioritize what they need to be working on. And I'm happy to be the ruthless one in those scenarios. But that's what I do. I lean heavily upon the people that are reporting into me to make it a success.
Walk us through how you won enterprise accounts like Mars, Vetco, Mission Pet Health. What's the playbook for a marketplace landing its first big logos?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting situation. We actually started at the bottom. And so what I mean by that is we started by going into individual hospitals and talking about Rue as a product and how it could help their practice managers, essentially with obviously scaling their staff and bringing, temporary workers in for per DM shifts. We forged great relationships with them. We're able to build trust with them by bringing providers that did the work into their hospital. And so that's kind of how things began. So then the powerful thing about that is I could then go to a lead procurement person or a head of ops in those types of businesses and say, hey, we've got, 90 of your hospitals that are utilizing our platform. We'd love to be more strategic with you in terms of how we work together and go from there. And that's how you build trust and relationships. And then, there's also a midpoint which comes into fruition after you make the top of the relationship meaningful. The midpoint decision makers are the folks who determine whether or not their region is going to use your tools and forge relationships and make sure they're educated and understand that the power is in their hands. One of the challenges at Rue is that relief is perceived as sort of a necessary evil in the industry just because it's costly. And when we go into those mid-level folks, we help them save costs. We give them operational tips, advice, and things like that. So we become a true strategic partner without being that necessary evil. So it's about breaking through that ceiling to make them understand that we are, in fact, trying to help.
You've, I think, been a part of and supported more than like 120 million in institutional capital raises across your career. What does an ops leader need to have buttoned up for investors, and what do founders maybe forget to prepare that you help them?
It's the diligence folder,
Yeah.
honestly. I have all the good things, I have all the bad things, and they live in an organized system so that when a investor comes around and they want to do that diligence, that we have all those files and paperwork and notes available and relatively organized. They're, of course, if you say, "Hey, I've got this, no problem, here it is," they're going to go a level deeper, but it's just all about being organized. Like fundamentally, that's what it is. So, for example, I keep all of our legal agreements in clear, easy to understand folders. At Rue, we also did a full blown audit, and that was certainly massively helpful in terms of prep for any type of institutional investment that we want to do to get an unqualified opinion, essentially. But yeah, that's it's all about organization and hard stop.
The diligence folder and be organized. Marketplace pricing discipline is pretty hard. How do you manage pricing without killing supplier demand?
We've always had a role for this or an analyst for this. And I think that's super, super critical. At Rue, it's actually a whole team. It's like a squad. It's a cross-functional squad that's dedicated to understanding the nuances of pricing. But at Soothe, we had Jason, who helped us, not you, Jason, other
Other
Jason,
Jason. It's a
who
common
helped
name.
us. Yeah, totally. Jeff is a far more unique name. So, but yeah, you have these folks who really can dig into data and help form the algorithm essentially that can fluctuate based on supply and demand. But to scale it, you really need really smart people in the room that have a solid command of data and can literally create an algorithm to match what's happening in the marketplace. That is one of those roles, Jason, that I do not do.
Yeah. One of the things that you've done a lot of is managing these licensed professional workforces at scale. So veterinarians now, before it was massage therapists. What's different about operating a marketplace with a licensed supply? Obviously the Uber and DoorDash and Instacart could be anybody off the street, basically, that can pass a background check. But there's a higher bar for these folks.
The blessing is that from a regulatory standpoint, we have a stronger ground to stand on in terms of ABC tests and things like that. So it makes having a labor force, an independent contractor labor force specifically, hold up in a court of law. That's really critical. I also think the other benefit is they tend to really be professionals. That person is making a significant investment, and that's going to make them way more likely to show up on the platform. So that's the plus. The negative is there's less of them. And so in order to scale a marketplace, it makes it much harder because the supply is just infinitely lower. So that's the blessing and the curse right there.
There's fewer licensed veterinarians than there are people walking down the street.
Yeah, that's
What's one process or system that you've built at basically every company that most operators are maybe skipping and shouldn't be?
I think one thing that's like really critical in terms of building a marketplace model is you have to get the scaling right, meaning you can't open 16 markets at one time. It is going to be a recipe for disaster. So for example, at Rue, we were really only opening about five markets per quarter max. And that was if they were sort of like secondary, tertiary cities. If you're focused on something like New York, you really got to throw everything you've got at that to understand it. And again, it really comes down to like how quickly can a provider move across that market? How dense do you have to have the providers in specific areas of that market that need to be serviced? That's what I would say. Don't scale at all costs is not going to work. And we actually saw a lot of that at Soothe in the beginning. We were really, and the
Capital is
reason we
not
were
cheap, and we're not in the ZERP era anymore.
right. Yeah, exactly. That's a huge difference for sure. Also, I think you learn a lot from doing this over and over again. And that's like my biggest thing is do it right the first time because what happens is if you fail, you have to go back and do it again, and then you're doubling your investment. We've almost exclusively eradicated that at Rue.
How do you build a compliance function that protects the business without slowing down growth?
I tend to err on business growth versus legal properness at basically all times. You can build the legal in, and we have. We did it at Soothe. We did it at Rue. I did it at another marketplace, Mercato. You build that in as you scale. The great thing about building a marketplace is there are pioneers that are ahead of you, Ubers, Lyfts, Grubhubs, who take the brunt of the legal stuff. Actually, in situations where we've tried to be proactive legally, our attorneys have advised us, hey, we got your note. We see what's happening. Let's see what happens with these big guys. And then we'll advise you on that. So I'd say like have a great set of terms and conditions. So sexy, I know. Get that, get that into a good place. Protect yourself as best as possible. But I would always aim a set of growth over regulatory.
You've done a lot of international expansion too. What's the one thing that's harder than everyone thinks about taking a marketplace overseas?
There's two things. One, don't be an arrogant American and think you know how to do everything in a foreign country because you don't. The second thing is you have to go in, understand the landscape for labor marketplaces. The best example I can give, while Australia might be a 16, 18-hour flight away, it's the Wild Wild West. They have very, very loose labor regulations. It's super friendly to any business that's trying to grow there. Whereas if you go into not the UK, but the EU, it's highly regulated. We had all kinds of challenges in Germany because of that regulation. You essentially don't have true independent contractors. You do have a lighter form of an employee, but you are responsible for healthcare, all kinds of things like that. So you got to know that they are just very, very different.
Cultural competence.
Cultural competence and cultural nuance. Like
Yeah.
it's just,
Yeah.
it's a thing.
Good tips. Let's get into a quick speed round. Quick questions, quick answers. You ready? All
Sure.
right. One metric that you check every Monday.
Yeah. Our GMV, how many bookings came through is what I check constantly. Not every Monday, it's like every hour.
One lesson that you learned the hard way about scaling marketplaces.
Going too fast results in failure. I can think of a number of markets in the US that I was like, oh, we can launch these all at the same time. They're relatively close together. And then we just bombed all of them.
One question that you ask every new hire internally on your team, or the vets that you're vetting, or any of the licensed professionals in a marketplace.
So the question that I ask most frequently is how do you correspond with people that are on like different levels, VPs, managers, ICs, like all that sort of stuff. Most important question for us is their level of experience. So let me give you the example at Rue. A lot of people like to do GP shifts, which is basically like immunizations, quick appointments, that sort of stuff, because it's like low lift. Think of it as retirement light. Our hospitals are not looking for that. And so I have to make sure that they understand that they're expected to do a full workload, et cetera.
Got it. All right. Last question. This one's not a speed round. If a founder asks you, what should I hire for first, growth, ops, or sales? What's your answer and why?
I think actually the growth person can be the ops person. That's what I've been in many cases. Growth is two things to me. One is it's the physical expansion of whatever you're doing. The second is the marketing. I don't do the marketing. We need somebody much smarter like yourself to do that. But growth is definitely critical. You can layer in ops afterwards. And you also, through that growth, start to experience pain points, which can give you indicators of where to do the ops work first.
Companies need a Jeff so that when those pain points arise, they can go chase them down and fix them.
Something like that. There's probably much smarter people out there, but
Swiss Army
sure.
knife operator or painkiller. All right, Jeff, this
Painkiller.
was specific. This was usable. Exactly why I do this show. Where can people find you online, and what should they reach out to you about?
You can find me basically on LinkedIn is sort of where I live, plugging what we're doing at Rue. I don't have a lot of social media accounts. In fact, I'm trying to reduce them. When your iPhone tells you you waste 12 hours a day on, the iPhone, I think there's something to be said. But yeah, find me on LinkedIn and I'm happy to chat with you about anything and everything related to marketplaces.
Awesome. Perfect, Jeff. Thanks for coming on.
You got it. Thanks, Jason. Good to see you.
That was Jeff Bishop Hill and a clear playbook for being the operator who scales marketplaces across every function. Here are my quick top 3 from today. Remember these if you don't remember anything else. Don't pick markets by sex appeal. Do the research. Jeff learned this the hard way at Soothe. Chasing glamorous cities like Miami and London instead of saturating the US costs time and money. The real playbook is household income, heat maps, logistics density, and provider coverage, not what looks good on a pitch deck. 2. Win enterprise accounts from the bottom up. Jeff didn't cold call Mars or Vetco at the top. He built trust hospital by hospital, proved the product worked at 90 locations, and then walked into procurement with receipts. Start with the individual user, earn the relationship, and the enterprise deals will follow. 3. Scale deliberately. Going too fast is the most expensive mistake. 5 markets per quarter max is what worked for Rue. Do it right the first time, because if you fail a launch, you have to go back and do it again. And now you've doubled your investment. Speed at all costs is a zero interest rate era luxury that no longer exists. Here's one action this week that you can do in less than 10 minutes. Look at your next planned market, product, or feature launch. Before you green light it, write down the 3 things that have to be true for it to work: supply density, logistics, demand signals, whatever applies. If you can't name them, you're launching on sex appeal. Do the research first. That's Frank Growth. If this gave you something you can use this week, follow the show and share it with one operator who needs it. I'm Jason Shafton from Winston Francois. We help companies build sustainable, repeatable growth with a proven operating system. Show notes and takeaways are in the description. Be frank and keep growing.